The next phase of the AI boom will be an AI agent.
Wake up, AI is here. Learning how to use AI should become your #1 priority.
Build AI agents.
AI is not going to take your jobs. The person who uses AI is going to take your job.
Build a solo founder operating system for your business with Hermes. 5 repeatable stations that I use day in and day out to find, propose, onboard, deliver, and report for all of my clientele. I'll show you how to build each with 3 core moves to run it, skill it, and schedule it. This guide will be fully self-serve. Every prompt, every checklist, every troubleshooting point, every piece of information will be available for you to consume asynchronously and also synchronously every week within our community. If you'd like the hands-on guided version, live builds, and community building that exact same system, this lives inside of our school community, where you'll be able to access all of this as you will. Inside of the classroom, you'll be met with a desktop guide, which I will walk through in the first half of this course, or the first quarter really, and then the next portion, which is about building those 5 stations so that you can repeatedly return revenue where it matters. So why does this exist? I created this with the intent of it being a product backbone for Plinko Solutions, my own AI and automation and learning development service, to bridge how to build AI agents in your day-to-day life. I'll be showing you how you can access Hermes through the desktop and iOS app, which is unlike any other guide that you have seen before, as these are novel things in the middle of 2026. This is copyrighted content, all written originally here to be delivered to you, ideally, of course, being of service first, and then a StableBot subscription wrapped, and then showing, of course, how to do that yourself as well. So within this, the assembly line that we'll be building today amongst this course after the setup is 5 stations that can prospect, so pretty much a sourcing engine that can find leads for you, how to propose to those prospects when there is a positive response in a way that doesn't take 2 days, but rather just 20 minutes to 2 hours, how we can then, after a yes, set everybody up and get them more orchestrated within whatever project management platform you so choose, and how to also explore different vehicles, different mechanics for what that delivery can look like as an AI and automation agency. If you are not an AI automation guy or are not interested in the agency world in general, there is still value to this, as you can extract a Hermes setup and then configure this to work within your service-based business. You'll also be able to report and draw analytics to meaningfully move the needle for you. So on each page, we'll be walking through essentially these modules that I have created to help you understand how to do this the right way, right? Each of these modules will follow this 3 kind of step method where you'll be able to run it upon prompt, save it as a skill that you can then revisit, and then to schedule that as a routine task that will run on its own. For the setup, we'll be using the desktop app. You will also be able to use your mobile iOS Hermes app, which is, I'll get into it when we set it up. It's another endpoint you can access the same model from. You'll also be able to build skills meaningfully that will trigger on a reliable input to then have a fleshed out kind of procedure or process to give you a reliable output that, of course, with governance and the right minds behind it, the right approval gates, you'll be able to filter the noise versus what matters. You'll also have access to, inside of the course, a 30-day plan that walks you through all of this, and also a dedicated Notion guide to also walk you through everything. The intent of this video course is to supplement this material, so you'll find the link to this, of course, within the community that you'll then be able to go ahead and build and get started, right? So you'll be able to, of course, in the first portion of this, focus on the quick start, how to get this thing set up, how to set up the stations, and then what does it look like to actually run it as an assembly line day in and day out. So if you're new here and you're unfamiliar with myself and pretty much the practice, let's get into it. So right before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jonathan McLemore. I spent the better half of the last decade working in sales and sales management, building sales infrastructure from the inside out. I've worked with building agents 9 to 9 within my own AI automation agency for the better half of the last 2 years. I'm now, well, I'll say I'm now, but recently in the last, I want to call it a year and some change, exploring more of the learning and development side of things. So being able to actually help people and teach people how to do this themselves without paying a nasty dime to another big company. So as you see, when you head over to PlinkoSolutions.com, there's a little bit of a tidbit around the people that we serve. which is ideally not just the 2 to 5 million red dot super user, but also the big group that is just barely paying for AI to begin with, and then eventually the bigger group that is actually exploring how to actually make this work in their day-to-day life without all the technical side of things. If you are a super user and you're joining us for this course, you're in a great spot. I think you'll have a lot of fun. You'll be able to explore what this looks like without having to do too much technical acrobats. If you are just a tier below the technical, that is a-okay. This guide is made to empower you and help you in a way that no other guides or resources have in the past. I should also mention, beyond the course, as provided from Plinko Solutions, I own and operate this. I have, without going too much into the hubris, I've generated a good amount of revenue and net new opportunities for a number of my clients, and I intend to, of course, continue that. Anyways, more on that to come. So, what are we working with today? There is a good overview specifically on the 30-day plan and what goes into the stations. We're basically combining a number of completed projects to actually move the revenue needle for the agency. That includes finding leads from a sourcing standpoint that are reliable and high signal towards the offer we're making. That also includes being able to propose at a steadfast pace with high quality and deep scope. That also includes being able to have the infrastructure and skills in place to actually support that when it comes to onboarding clients and providing enough detail and context to get the thing done, as well as having delivery vehicles that if something is a common project or something off the shelf, we're able to produce that with just about the same, if not more quality to come. And of course, reporting and analytics on top of that, so that whatever you can measure, or so that what you measure, you can actually improve. All right, so before diving into the stations, let's zoom out a little bit more and revisit what is Hermes. Hermes is the agent that grows with you. Now, of course, this is all agents that are past the 2026 benchmark in terms of doing real work for you. One of the key differences between this and a ChatGPT is that instead of just prompting and talking to it back and forth, you connect this to your tooling and you have it actually go do the work for you. Another great advantage of this is that it lives on a private server, meaning a lot of the work that we are doing in the setup is setting that up on that server to then create an endpoint, which is an endpoint is simply a gateway for it to talk to other software. The other software in this context would be the desktop app. So for that, of course, looks like this, right? So the desktop app is pretty sweet. Won't go too much into it, but basically it is another kind of Claude co-work, anti-gravity, cursor. It's another harness that you can attach model of your choice, as well as customize the UI and the whole shebang, right? You can connect it to your own models, your own tooling, and essentially be able to get real work done. What's really cool about Hermes specifically here is that it will actively self-clean, self-learn, and persist with its memory no matter which interface you're interacting it with. That's really helpful, especially being able to control the computer and browser use, and being able to do that from your phone is a huge value add. Hermes itself is a publicly supported project. It's open source, so if you're interested in diving more into that, feel free to dig in the description. Hermes is the iOS branch of this. This is a also publicly open source project that allows you to connect to your Hermes from your phone. This enables a lot of great empowerment. You can download it straight off the App Store. The caveat is, if you don't know how to configure an endpoint and set that up, which we'll go into in this guide, you'll be left with an app on the onboarding screen and you won't really make it much further than that. So let's take care of that. Let's go ahead and get started on DigitalOcean. So again, if you'd like to follow this guide, it is available in the school community, and we're going to actually use it to walk through this step by step. So within the school community, you'll be able to find the Hermes desktop setup. This video, of course, will take the place of this, but ideally, what you're going to do is you're going to consider that ownership is a valuable thing. DigitalOcean gives you affordable ownership at a rate that you can actually build things on. There are alternatives. If you'd like a free approach, there's AWS, and I have a guide on that with OpenClaw if you'd like to dig into it. I use the same infrastructure for OpenClaw. So you'll be met with a fresh account. In the bottom left, you'll ignore everything but droplets, which is under compute. Under compute, you'll be able to spawn these droplets. So we're going to go ahead and create droplet. You are going to choose essentially a data center that is nearby you. You're then going to stick with Ubuntu, which is Linux in this case, right? So I'm just going to full screen this so you guys can see everything that's happening. You're going to go ahead, scroll down under basic shared CPU. You're going to go regular and essentially choose above 8 gigs of RAM. ideally just 8 gigs, which is 48 a month. On this as well, you're going to scroll down and you're going to enable a password that is nice and reliable. So I'm just going to go ahead and pause and create that. You are then, after creating that password, going to set it up as an IP4 address. You can additionally, if you know what you're doing on the networking side, set it up as an IPv6. Going to add in the free monitoring because why not? We're going to leave out the scripts. We're going to scroll down. You're going to name it something nice and powerful. Then once you're done, you're going to go ahead and click create droplet. You're going to give it a moment to spawn. I'm going to zoom in just to cover a bit of information. But essentially what this will do is it will spawn a droplet for you to use. Then, of course, following the guide, you're going to borrow the official installation instructions as you get from the main site. So if you're wondering where this comes from, back onto the main site. If you head all the way back up here, right underneath the desktop installation, which we'll do shortly, you'll see down here, there's also the Linux option. You're going to click that. You're going to click copy. Of course, with that, you're going to head back over to the droplet. Side of that droplet, once it's active, you're going to click web console. Considering you've waited longer than 5 seconds, it will be active. After waiting about a minute or 3, you'll find the memory heartbeat comes alive. You're going to click web console. You'll then find yourself greeted with a Linux terminal. Now, do not be scared, especially if you are not technical. This is not something you'll live in for a long time. So you're going to go ahead and drag that to the right. You're going to remember that command instead of clipboard, which is just Control V. That doesn't work with these terminals. You have to use your mouse, right click and paste, and hit enter. From here, it will pull everything that it needs to pull and get set up. Ideally, once this is done, you will run the Hermes setup and the gateway installation, which I will do with you shortly. So I'm just going to go ahead and pause and I'll let this go. So if you are not technical, you can skip over this piece in terms of verbiage, but if you are technical, basically what it is doing is installing a virtual presence upon your server so that it can engage with the environment without messing up the whole main thing. So what that means, essentially, there's a main server that you see in DigitalOcean. On top of that main server, there's the virtual environment that it's able to actually build and do things in. By default, it will work within the main server, but it has that separation so that the blast radius is nice and contained if anything goes awry. Anyways, I will go ahead and stay quiet as it finishes. All right, this is always a fun piece to show. It's installing all the kind of terminal animations and pretty stuff, getting all the Node JavaScript all connected, which basically allows it to manipulate its own browser, its own computer within its own server, meaning it doesn't touch any of your hardware to do any computer use. You can alternatively connect it subsequently, connect it to a Chrome extension, which allows it to do that. I wouldn't recommend it. I would let it kind of use its own device and its own computer. You'll also be able to interact with it through the desktop and iOS, so I think that should be plenty. If you are interested in connecting it to your live browser and session cookies, there's Chrome extension guides for that, but we won't be covering that. You'll see it's installing that Chrome headless shell, meaning its own browser, for it to do work upon. There are also a number of browsers that exist specifically for agentic browsing. You can explore those as well. They're not a bad alternative. It just depends what your overall use case is. So you'll see it's installing the user interface dependencies, getting that all nice and set up. There we are. We're going to be prompted with the setup wizard. Keep in mind, clipboard still does not work. You have to use your arrows and hit enter. For our sake and purposes, we're going to do full setup. Keep in mind, if you click Control C or escape at any point, it will cancel this installation and you'll have to run Hermes setup to start it back up. So give it a beat as it gets all set up. So after you've given it a breath, it will continue to run that setup. Then it will ask you to set up a exact model for it to connect to. For our sake and purposes, it's interesting every time that I go to set this up, it's a new different prompt. I'm going to go ahead and skip that. So I'll come back to that. Go ahead, set up the terminal backend to local. Right, so it uses the old local server. Going to skip the communication channels for now, but go ahead and hit arrow and space if you want to set any of these up. You'll then see the tool configuration. So I have web search, browser automation, the good 5.9 on this. You can add more to this if you see fit. It's up to you. So go ahead and hit enter once you're done. It'll then ask for a provider specifically for browser use. We're gonna go ahead and do local for now. Like I mentioned, there are browser specific things for agents to scrape. That is up to you to dig into. For most case and purposes, you really don't need it. So I'm going to get it all nice and configured. Now it's asking for the provider once again. I recommend connecting it to your codex above anything else. If you do not have OpenAI as a paid subscription, keep it off of Anthropic. Do not let it touch it. It will suspend your account. If you have any other models that you'd like to pay by just API, you can totally explore that. But go ahead and hit codex. This is specifically for the image side of things, so I'm going to let it just run with that. We'll come back to actually setting up the main language model to be codex. For being able to do, I believe this was text to speech if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So we're going to let it stick with its native. We're going to stick to our main model, which we'll come back to. Of course, text to speech, you can play around. GPT real-time voice is coming out a lot of new stuff these days, so you can explore however you choose. So here it's taking a beat to figure out that I do not have a model provider already set up, so it's taking a moment to figure out what to do. Once it's done with that, it'll ask you for a search provider. In this case, you can choose any dedicated search provider you'd like. If not, the main internet and Google. I'm gonna go ahead and skip on that. It's gonna go through all this and bring me right back to my root. Now I'm gonna go ahead and type Hermes model before I do the gateway install. So now I'm prompted with a number of different models. I'm going to choose OpenAI. I'm going to choose Codex. It's going to give me a URL. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this on another screen just to keep it all private. Going to log into my main GPT account, go through my 4-factor authentication so you criminals can stay away. And then ideally, you'll see here, it will go ahead. It will continue to prompt you once you enter in those authentication codes. It will then ask you for the terminal code, the device code specifically. You're going to go ahead and copy and paste that in. Once that is done, you will see login successful, and you get to choose your model of choice. I recommend a 5.3 Codex Spark if you want to stay cheap. 5.4 is generally good for day-to-day work. All right, so now that's all installed. You're going to install the first gateway, which will enable you to go ahead and configure it to basically open up its service for any reach. So now that is done, I am going to go ahead and actually start it. So Hermes gateway start. It's installed, now it's live. The user service is created. I then am going to simply just type Hermes. All right, so keynotes on the gateway setup. Highly recommend exploring how to secure this with credentials, depending on where you're interacting it from. All that being said, now the next portion is connecting this to your desktop. So let's get into it. All right, so moment of truth, go ahead and send a message saying hey, and then once it responds with hey, you know that your model is connected as well as your gateway and everything else is set up. So now you can interact with it straight from the terminal. If you would like to set this up on the browser so that you can access it directly within your domain of choice, you can connect it to Vercel or really wherever else you have your domains hosted. And by giving it access to do that, you're able to spawn subdomains, and you can basically ask it to deploy the GUI, the graphical user interface, as an endpoint on the browser. So simply just prompt it to do so. A little less straightforward for the desktop setup. So first things first, over on the school community, you'll find this link within the second piece. You'll be able to go to this link on GitHub to clone a skill that I have drafted for specifically creating server endpoints. Now I will say this is simply a skill. It is not perfect. Right? So you have the simple instructions of copy and pasting this in. Alternatively, you can also just copy the link and paste it into the agent, and it should be able to make use of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open this back up, and I'm going to paste that in. Now, normally this works outside of the simple chat, but you're pretty much going to copy paste that in. And once it's installed, or while it's installing rather, one thing you can do, head back over to NewS Research, the main site. You could also find this by just searching Hermes agent. You'll come to the main site. Here, you'll see the download for Windows. We're going to go ahead and download that. That will give you the desktop app. It's going to take about 10 to 15 minutes because it's doing the exact same thing. It's installing all of the capabilities and everything locally. The only difference is it's not opening up an individual gateway for anyone else to access, but rather it's connecting to the gateway endpoint that we're setting up within the server. So what does that look like? Over here, it is installing that skill, which basically deploys that remote gateway endpoint. Once it's done, it's in. You're going to ask, I want to connect to my desktop app. Give me a server URL and password. So now, if you have multiple Hermes instances on your main desktop app, you're going to go ahead and create a new profile. So over here, of course, you'll be greeted with a different page, but in my instance, I'm going to go demo, just demo. You can clone it from an existing profile if you'd like to maintain any of the SolMD, any sort of points, especially if you have OpenClaw already previously set up. This will auto import, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new profile upon the demo. I'm going to go ahead up to the top. Now it should show just basically as is. It may prompt you to engage and authenticate with your own same provider. You can do that. Again, you're setting up a separate agent here, essentially, just temporarily for the point of setup. Then once you're done with that, you're heading down to Gateway, but you'll see the different profiles. You'll see the one that is for you, stuck on local gateway. You're going to click remote gateway and you'll have access to a remote URL here. Now, all things going well, ideally your agent will produce this URL in a one shot that you can copy paste. Without this skill, you'll go back and forth. You'll have a bit of engagement to hopefully land on a working URL. If you find any hiccups at this step, just go back and forth. Keep prompting it, saying it's not working, please fix. Chances are it's something to do with your network. So that all taken into context, you're gonna let it cook. Once it is done, you'll be able to copy paste that right into the desktop. The desktop then enables you to add attachments, create artifacts, talk to it in a voice conversation, and of course share memory and safety across the entire workspace. You also have the option, I mean you can do this throughout the terminal as well, but to connect to different tools and MCP setup so you can actually configure that. You can also tweak the interface to be a bit more, however you'd like, to be honest. Dark mode, light mode, all that jazz. So once the server is nice and cooperative, you're gonna go ahead and copy paste it. So I'll just pause until that's ready. So again, just to recap, and this again is available within the school community, you're setting up a gateway connection with a remote URL and a secure session token. So you'll see me blink that out on the screen. Again, this will not always work. You have to go back and forth depending on your network savings. Again, I've been a victim here. I think if you've followed any of my content before, I've seen API bills that were crazy. You don't want to get anything spread. So with that in mind, of course, if you're interested in the school community, there's a lot behind the manifesto with Hermes and what it's capable of and what it can do. And if you're interested in that sort of stuff, feel free to dig into our community. We have a lot more on it, especially when it comes to taking software as a service and understanding that it truly is a tax on growth and being able to take total sovereignty and own the harness, own the software yourself. You're able to produce something that at a real identity layer can multiply your output. That involves, or that includes, real revenue returned back where it matters. Of course, you can feel free to customize your agent to your liking. There's a little tidbit here on voice, so you can configure and change the voice. Also, the soul itself and what it can do. Now, I recognize these look like quite the AI-generated photos. They are, but a big purpose of conveying them here is showing all these different components that once connected, it can actually truly do and offload within your day-to-day life. One key note, as you're using the agent, you'll find that the usage itself is not reported native in the app, no matter where you look. Depending if you're coming from Codex, have the Codex app yourself and monitor that usage in the bottom left. And if you're using any other tools, API billing, highly recommend daily monitoring them, checking them. If you notice any anomalies, shut it off, turn it off, and then yeah, let's get cooked. Just start rocking with it. But you'll see it has produced a server URL. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. It's gonna ask me to sign in. It'll prompt me with a nice little sign in window. I'm gonna go ahead and steal that sign in information. Highly recommend saving this somewhere nice and refutable. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this right after. So even if, despite it being blurred, any issues, whatever it is. So you'll see once it's signed in, I can then interact with the agent directly. Bingo. And it shows everything else we worked on, shared, and visioned. So now you can freely close the terminal. You have a working desktop app, nice and pretty, all things in good strides. Your next natural step here is setting up the iOS app. All right, so you're gonna go ahead and prompt your agent to basically copy paste from this skill, which is very much like the desktop setup, proprietary, sitting inside of the school community. I will say the iOS app is a novel production, meaning this is an open source project that only recently came out and was primarily Mac OS only. What you are seeing on the screen today is one of the first iterations that is Windows friendly, meaning you first connect the desktop app, which is on your Windows device, and then you connect the mobile point to that desktop app. What that means is you're gonna go ahead, paste this link in, then you're gonna ask to set this up to work on mobile, give me the HTTPS URL, not tail scale, and the password for this. Reason being, if you have an HTTPS URL, that's a user authentication. That pretty much sets you up. If you really care about monitoring the activity amongst your network, you can go down the VPN route. It is the one that natively comes with Hermes. I prefer not to because that's still an exposure endpoint. If anything, you're just creating a fork in your network data. If you have something nice and trackable, a single lane in the HTTPS side, you can at least monitor it, see what's happening on it. Once you're done that, you'll see I've already kind of done it, so it's duplicate effort, but you'll be able to have all that information and access it reliably. So that is the iOS app. All right, time to get into the meat and potatoes of the Hermes agent building a solo founder operating ship with a desktop app. So That's what we'll primarily be operating out of. Mind you, you can still maneuver a lot of this through the iOS side and mobile being off and about. For more on the roadmap and initiative behind the whole vision behind this, you'll be able to visit plinkosolutions.com/about, and you'll be able to see it after you scroll down for a bit. We'll be building the assembly line, so you'll notice I'll be decently quick with it in terms of information. More important, truthfully, to just be able to copy paste and join for the ride. So what are we doing today? We are building 5 stations that sit on top of the Hermes agent infrastructure. You'll also be able to access these live agents through that same dashboard, and you'll also be able to understand an identity layer and how that comes into place with Hermes versus other agents. We'll be exploring a library of skills as well as different approaches to make this revenue producing. There is a high overview 30-day kind of plan for this. I recommend stretching this guide out. You can do it in one sitting if you have the usage that allows you to do so. I have upgraded to the Codex Max plan to achieve that. However, when I was first building this a couple weeks back, I did have the Max first tier plan, so it's definitely achievable. On top of the $50 a month to operate on the server front, the rest is all just your subscription. So if you need support, feel free to reach out. This is a really exciting project, especially putting Hermes in the hands of people that truly need it. Haven, Founder Cockpit, show the 5-station brief. That's great and all if you actually have the Even Reality smart glasses, but if you don't, the desktop app is synced no matter which voice interface you're really working with, as well as the mobile app. On the mobile app, I can say the same stuff, and I have an agent with its own computer, able to pull from any model I'd like, mine is Claude and Anthropic, and it's able to produce real work. But what does that look like as a solo founder? My name is Jonathan McLemore. I own and operate a learning and development service around AI and automation. I've been operating mostly as an agency for the better half of the last 2.5 years now. And within that, I have a number of different projects. I myself have been able to draw direct income from doing this, as well as support businesses and seeing numbers they haven't or couldn't even fathom beforehand. So hubris aside, what are we building here today? The mission in what we're doing here today is to return time where it matters most. The opportunity, wherever you are within your entrepreneurial journey with service-based businesses, you're able to implement or use one, if not a combination of 5 core stations. Those 5 core stations is what we'll be spending the next hour or so diving into. Starting with station 1. Essentially, any service-based business, one of their core issues is the need to constantly source leads. Typically, without the right process in place, the firmographics, the pain signals, and the reachability of those leads fall underneath the wayside. So the purpose of this station is to surface qualified, at least by signal in terms of opportunities, with evidence. This is run on a regular schedule that, of course, you can review and refine as per your usage needs. So like all good sourcing engines, we begin with defining your ideal lead. This video part is mostly leaving this fairly open because there is a number of different businesses out there. I'll share a few examples of sourcing engines that I have done to make this make sense for you. So one of them is a tax firm opportunity, a sourcing engine that I had built using the browser agent flow. I was working with a tax firm, did 86 plus projects for, and at the time they were looking at essentially sourcing federal tax liens from government websites and then being able to extract information from that to then render or offer services. So I took a look at the firmographics, the different geography points, who owns these leads once they come in. I was able to see from a pain point what this allows them to do at scale is really speed to lead. I was able to then reliably continue to output different reports, and that fed onto their sales floor where they're able to produce an additional 200 to 300K of net new revenue just from this project alone. Another sourcing project that I was able to produce was a 503 pharmaceutical scrape. So I realize as you're looking at this, it's just a bunch of blurred out context, which is kind of the nature of this thing. But if you can, I guess, use your bit of imagination, this was for a pharmaceutical manufacturer that was looking to surface all of the 503A compounding pharmacies in America. So we're able to then extract all of that, and we're able to produce a full list, I believe around 8,000 is where it led to. So being able to run this on schedule, constantly pumping leads, constantly cycling through the information was allowing me to then surface something really useful. All right, so assuming you've identified the vertical, what size of company you're looking for, the geography and where they reside, who owns what in terms of decision-making and economic buyers. Assuming that you've understood the pain of the people that you're trying to help and what that looks like when it is externalized. And how do we observe that from the outside? Is that hiring for certain roles? Is that response times and complaints? Is it manual processes visible throughout the entire experience, right? Is it a sort of duct tape approach that is inevitably broken telephone? By identifying that signal, you're also able to understand where can you reach them. So ultimately, that's a balance of a strategic fit, right? Which is a grandiose way of saying it makes sense to talk to each other. And then holding that in the same shape of operational drag. What is the friction to actually connect to the people that you need to? Where is the relevance? What's in it for them to respond to you? That, you'll see kind of the weighing here, is also measured by the accessibility, right? So what do you do on your end to make that friction go away? Or at least distill it in a way that increases their confidence in working with you. By having that ironed out, you then are given the binary option of what should be excluded, right? So the exclusions component is really looking at who do we not want, right? Where is the feedback coming? Where are the leads coming in that we don't want? And how do we filter that out? By creating that binary, it splits the black and white and allows you to define your ideal lead. Taking that onto step 2. Yeah, that's your ideal lead. That's what it looks like. Here's how to build it. So you have one master prompt. So you're finding name of the client, name of the prospect rather, firmographics that are related to them, businesses that likely have this pain point. And then for each, give me a company, website, who runs it, the signal itself, and evidence of that pain, and why, in one sentence, they're worth my time. Exclude, leave out seniorities, trigger events, things like that. And verify that each site loads and show activity in the last 6 months. You can connect this to Google Drive, have it show in a table. You can also output this directly in the chat. It's up to you. This is your very first sourcing engine. Keep in mind, when you build this, you want to build it to run as free as possible. So having it build deterministic scripts, meaning Python, Selenium, Playwright, removes the agent out of the equation and lets you rely less on computer use and more on actual website scraping. The additional pieces that this has to go through is grading and scoring. So a verification system. So this can be done through enrichment tools like hunter.io. This can be done through evidence-based searching, which is basically pain signals through blogs, events, announcements. You can also figure out reach, depending if you have access to certain CRM tools, specific software yourself. You can connect that to Hermes agent and allow it to run whatever enrichment, any sort of verification that it needs. Once it does it reliably, you're gonna go ahead and ask it to save this as a skill. Once it does that, it will surface as a skill that you can then access at any point you choose. So it's gonna show what that looks like. Okay, so if you'd like to access those tools yourself, in the top left, you'll see under skills and tools. You have a number of them here. By asking it to save, you add it to the great collection to then reuse and repurpose over time. This is like laminating. Once you have something that's nice and pretty, it goes into a nice little plastic setup that you can repeat and use over and over. Your next step is to then add a cadence to it, because anything done manually is still a human. So the idea is to remove as much human in the loop as possible once the quality is up to par. So I know we've sped through here on a quick 5 to 10 minutes on the sourcing engine. This is its iterations at the end of the day. You want to keep at it until your station 1 is nice and reliable. It is an assembly line that implements prospecting engines, a proposal/document generation system, an onboarding system that will offload most of the labor it takes to onboard somebody, a delivery engine that's able to pull from a catalog, which you'll have access to through blueprints. It will be able to deliver a number of automation projects out of the box, off the shelf, to empower businesses today. You'll then be able to measure that and report back and actually showcase the return on investment. This is a solo founder guidebook for an AI and automation agency that I have used myself to own and operate my own learning and development service. The biggest piece around what matters here in the next hour is moving the needle. So walk with me as we go through the 5 stations that allow you to run not just your business, but any service-based business that is hunkered down in administrative work, and showing you how you can wrap that in whatever agent harness you are using. I'll mostly be showcasing it through the Hermes desktop and iOS app. You can, if you'd like, use any harness of your choice. If you're interested in the Hermes setup, I think it's the most effective, especially with all the benefits that you get from building something like this. If you're interested in that, the desktop and iOS setup guide is also available in the school community. All right, let's get started. One last note with the station visualizer and everything that you're seeing here, it's all proprietary information that I've created with the intent of it being a product for Plinko Solutions to offer its clientele going forward. It will eventually become wrapped within the iOS app that you will be able to access. But in the meantime, this is all of the blueprints, all of the gems, so that you can go ahead and build it yourself. This is my way of really bringing a magnum opus of a lot of material that I've worked on over the years and moving the needle, right, for those that I love to service the most. Enough preamble. Let's get into station one. All right, just to get oriented before diving into the absolute weeds, every station that you see here today is worth $3,500 to $5,000 each in managed services. KPMG actually charges 3 times that at $15K per actual implementation, giving it to you all here today at a fraction of what it would cost otherwise. The aim is to service this as a really done for you or even DIY done with you approach. The ultimate side of it is there's a real pain point behind a sales rep that is actively spending more than 80% of their week doing the work that you're going to see an agent do. It's also worth noting that the market is heavily underserviced when it comes to the speed to lead problem, right? The capacity to respond to somebody within the hour versus the average 2 days that it takes really does move the needle for a service-based business that is seeing volume. It's also important to understand that across the board, it is 5 to 25 times more expensive to win a new client over keeping one, meaning retention as well as a sourcing engine put together, even just that combo alone is quite lethal when it comes to the market. If you're interested in diving deeper into the kind of background and the research behind it, the community has some sources you can dig into. Again, just to reiterate from the intro point, everything you're going to see here today is built on the Hermes harness, meaning there's some different patterns that you'll see that you can kind of extrapolate and apply in your own harness. Meaning you are going to spend time on each station. You have a 30-day plan. Nothing is done overnight, where you continually improve and swing the axe as it sharpens. Once something is performing and returning on investment time-wise, you then wrap it into a skill so it is then compressed and that you can deliver it time and time again. Then, depending on what the actual task is, you can schedule it out. So that way you remove yourself from the operations and you're able to actually have something running without you having to be there. If you're a bit lost on the setup and side of things, that's included at the earlier half of this course. You'll be able to access that guide as well within the community. For each station, the anatomy of the skill is quite important. We'll be able to wrap when does it fire, what it needs to start, what are the procedures and processes in place that allow that output to map to what we want. And then how do we ensure the human in the loop is there efficiently? There will also be an access to a catalog of skills and resources, as well as a full guide that you can use asynchronously or following along here. All right, so getting into station one. I have sold over 15 different prospecting / sourcing engines. These are done for you projects that allow the end user to find high signals in terms of likely leads that they can follow through with. This is typically built on the backbone of firmographics, which is evidence layered upon what works, meaning if you're finding a pharmaceutical client, if they're looking for a specific pharmacy, then understanding where does that pharmacy live, what directories do they live on. If it is a tax firm and they're looking for people filing for federal tax liens, you would go on government websites and you'd be able to pull those reports that are public. Alternatively, another example, if you are looking for marketing leads to sell marketing services to, you would be able to scrape forums as well as social media and even job listings that are looking for marketing help, right? Being able to pull qualified or at least market qualified opportunities gives you the opportunity to actually target your messaging, target your work, and reach them in a way that is actually useful. Ultimately, to build this, we're going to go through a few steps. So one, you're going to define your ideal lead. This here you can fill out on your own. I will go ahead and walk you through what it looks like once it's actually running and working. Then prompted, well, you're then given a master prompt. This here is you taking your worksheet and filling in the gaps or filling in the blanks as you would with the prompt. So finding and firmographics, right? So I mentioned a few examples. Go with the marketing one for the sake of example. So a marketing agency is looking for service-based businesses performing over 50K a month and mainly based within Denver, Colorado, right? They are experiencing traffic on their website, but it's not returning what they want. All right, so here's an example of this working. Using the marketing agency approach or example, we're going to say find 20 US-based digital marketing agencies with 10 to 50 employees and an estimated revenue of 1 million to 5 million that likely have no marketing automation or CRM workflows in place, right? That's customer relationship management. This is suggesting they're doing manual reporting, manual lead routing, and they're copy pasting data between Google Sheets. Believe it or not, these businesses exist. For each of these leads, give me a company, a website, who runs it, the size signal, and specific evidence that shows that they are doing manual reporting. Give me a sentence and a brief on why they're worth my time, and then exclude agencies that already advertise AI and automation because chances are they're already using it, and also exclude franchises and company-owned agencies because it's just, I want to say, a bit of a bigger approval chain, a bit too much headache to work through. Verify that each site loads and show activity in the last 6 months and put it in a table. I can, if I would like to, connect this to my own internal system, right? So if you're using your own Google Sheets or your own CRM, your own whatever the infrastructure is, you can connect that to this, right? To your Hermes agent. And from your phone, from your glasses, if you choose to, you can command this and you can send this on a schedule. Ultimately, you'll spend a lot of time on this step and you're going to keep fine-tuning this over and over and over until it gives you what you want. Ultimately, when you do it over, you get a few benefits of recursive self-improvement that allow it to basically get better with time. All right, so I'm gonna pause real quick just so you can see what this looks like once it's done. So providing that you have given it the connection to different scripts that you would want, connection to whatever sort of scraping infrastructure you'd like, any sort of tooling that you may already have, right? You can go back and forth and improve the prospecting engine with whatever tooling you bring to the table, right? That can be open source and free stuff. That can be your own paid tooling. Ultimately, once it is done, you'll be provided a list of leads. You can connect this to an external source like Google Sheets or your own tools, like I mentioned. Ultimately, once you are done, you are going to go ahead and score it across 4 core levels. 1, verify it's real, that the links work, everything is nice and operative. Checkbox. All right, the next piece is there's evidence, the pain signal that is specific to this company. Checkbox. You're also ensuring that there is reach and the decision maker is findable, right? Also checkbox. That's so what? Why does this matter? What makes them want to connect to you? Being able to prepare all of that messaging in a way that is relative to your outreach strategy, right? So that's email, LinkedIn DMs, phone numbers, whatever the calls are, or even just having a DM conversation. Based on the channel in which you are interacting with the lead, you're going to customize your prospecting engine and tailor it according to that. All right, all green lights, moving on. Once this is working and it's repeatable and it's reliable, you are going to ask Hermes to save this workflow in a skill, right? You can ask any harness you're using, but for Hermes in this instance, you're going to include the definition, the exclusions, the format, the evidence requirement, and the verification needed. You'll also be able to add any sort of niche overrides that help you use this reliably time and time again. I myself have spent about 2.5 weeks on each of these prospecting engines. I mentioned I've built just over a dozen of them. They're powerful, they're cool stuff. And I think the more you can wrap it in real work, the more you can then schedule it, offload it, and produce real revenue. Moving on from the prospecting sourcing engine to a proposal engine. This here as Station 2 was an early system that I put into my own AI automation agency, and I feel actively contributed to me getting consistent clients month in and month out. I used to get an opportunity, right? A prospecting call, discovery call went well, and then I would go back to the drawing board and I'd look at all the perfect ways to approach their project. And then I eventually wrapped that into a skill. That skill I coined the name as pitch frame. What this allowed me to do, and I'll show you guys very briefly, pitch frame is a skill that I fed into my agent to assess if an opportunity was a strategic fit. I would get a gauge on the scope and delivery risk relative to the opportunity. I'd figure out what the quickest win was as reliable MVP. And what commercial positioning can I do as an owner and operator, as a solo founder, to ensure there's the highest win-win for both of us? So I'd be able to apply this to job opportunities, job listings, especially through Upwork. I'd also be able to take a transcript from a discovery call and feed it into the pitch frame skill. And I'd be able to then take that and extract it into a proposal document. So what does that look like? Using the updated template, I ask for a proposal for the hyperscale. Typically, I'd have a conversation with the company, so I'd have a transcript to feed into here, but I will show you guys for the sake of the skill for what it can produce. Ultimately, what I do here is I have a bit of back and forth to define the deal anatomy, what goes into the shape of it, what goes into the exclusions, the different patterns, and then based on the process and my experience, I'm able to gauge, is this an accurate assessment? I then go through, I don't automate this fully, but this does save a lot of scoping time so that I don't have to go in and, again, go through my 300 tabs. As well as pricing discipline, I'll get into this when it comes to the reporting, but on a frequent basis, I'm able to assess my progress if I am not progressively sending proposals at a higher either rate or volume than I am experiencing entropy, not growth. That as well allows me to skill the AI in a way that I can reliably create proposals and statement of works if I need contracts generated, right? I'm able then to go in, because it's all Google Doc connected, right? It's all Google MCP at the end of the day, that I'm able to then see what variations make sense. If you do not have Google connected to your harness, separate chat, hey, connect to Google Docs. Then it'll take you about 5 to 10 minutes. Once that is done, you'll be able to connect this proposal generator in a meaningful way that collapses the gap between a good discovery call and then the buyer's remorse that slowly develops. And that's before they even pay, right? If they verbally agree, which is what a good discovery call does, you want to ensure that within that same window, they are receiving the documentation and they're ready to move forward. While it's still working on the right, just to extrapolate a bit more, different deals, depending on the business that you're working with, have different shapes. Being able to create those structures in a reliable, consistent fashion allows you to standardize this process as much as possible, ultimately shaving off hours every week for whatever rep is responsible for doing this. Ultimately too, when you are running it, you can use this master prompt if you so choose to. Basically taking a selection of assets, you can take that transcript as well as a big founder voice note or owner operator voice note saying this is everything related to this project. Then you'll be able to run a scoring system that basically evaluates if this is a strategic fit. Again, having this anchored in an AI that understands your long-term goals, your short-term goals, and the viability of these goals is really key and important. If you have not developed that relationship with your AI harness, this station itself, you won't get as much return on investment. If anything, it'll just be a document generator, no different than Gemini and Google Docs. So for yourself to really experience, I mean, Hermes has the sort of skill enveloping capacity. Other harnesses are now kind of growing towards that, but ultimately you'll be able to grow and have that growth happen without your consistent digging for that growth. Having an agent that is anchored in your results allow you to have a bit more of a pricing discipline and a bit more logic behind the red flags. It helps you move out of this echo chamber of just being yourself and having agents that can actually work with you to figure things out. Ultimately, there's a number of different red flags depending on your industry, as well as different rules that measure towards the quality of what you're doing. Once that is all nice and done, you'll be able to take that, wrap it in a skill that you can call upon when you need to. So give me a preview on Google Docs. Again, the more you standardize this process, the better it is to navigate, especially when you're working through the different various inputs. Having a procedure that filters through and understands that input to then surface quality results is ultimately what we need. All right, I'm going to pause for the preview. So as you see, it went ahead and used the MCP to cook up what it needs to cook up. We're then going to get to see a quick preview. So again, not much context, so it won't be the most compelling of contracts, nor the most pretty. But feeding in more visuals, diagrams, again, having a template Google Docs where it works on the header and everything else, you're able to get something fairly reliable. You can also take these paragraphs by paragraphs and use this to actually build your proposal, right? So taking this as a blueprint or a component of the bigger picture is ultimately what makes sense. So you'll see here is actually looking at multiple ways to engage, and it's hitting up all the boxes that I would require within a contract. And of course, getting this to be visually appealing and not a wall of text is the next step. So that is your Station 2. Just to reiterate, the purpose of Station 2 is a post-discovery on-demand proposal generator. After a call, you want to ensure that you're monetizing that opportunity as soon as reliably possible. You want to ensure that the human review of that happens at a fraction of the risk because of the data scoring and everything else that happens alongside that. You're able to generate scope and pricing that is competitive with the market. You're also able to discipline that in your own growth and your own goals. This is extremely compelling for a business that would need some sort of follow-up sequencer, some sort of objection prep, even a loss analyzer that can then figure out why did things not go the way they needed. This is a data point to use, and we'll bring that up in our future stations. With that, let's get into Station 3 real quick, because this is a great opportunity going into Station 3, because Station 3 and 2 benefit from the same, I would say, advantage with using Hermes specifically. Having a pitch frame skill that allows you to scope quickly, and also empowering a business, i.e. yourself, for speed to lead, sharpens the axe repeatedly. In doing that, you standardize that deal anatomy, and by doing so on a regular basis, you're able to then improve your data results. This creates an opportunity for loop engineering, where you can tie different improvement points, right, based on different feedback, and allows you to improve as a solo founder / owner and operator. All right, enough on Station 2. Moving on to Station 3. This one is a fun one. I've spent a good amount of time working with a number of management consultants and product designers, being able to really understand where in this part does it actually move the needle for a business? Like, how compelling is it when you say yes to somebody and they can not just reassure you, but they can orient you with a timeline and expectations of what success looks like for the next little bit. You're then echoing back on that discovery call, or from that discovery call rather, what the client wanted, right? And ensuring that that context and structure for how that's going to happen is all available and standardized. You're essentially, and bear with me because this one's a bit more of an abstract concept, you are anchoring their expectations in the frame of what it would look like. I'll do that one more time. You are anchoring the joy of progress in the mind of a lead that has paid you money. You are anchoring success in the frame of the experience, right? The experience of getting the product, using the product, experiencing the service, right? That experiential design happens at a layer above, meaning as an enterprise, meaning a business that considers organizing themselves in a way to produce service and net positive good to the world, you're able to anchor that timeline, budget, and the client's expectations in a governed experience. A governed experience is something that's controlled, right? It may not feel constricted, which is what people associate control with, but it is predetermined, right? There is a repeatable success. And the more you can, I don't want to say butter, but the more you can create a good time around that experience, the more you can aid the anxiety and stresses of somebody that is paying you money. So with that changes a yes into wow, what more can we do? Just by implementing this station, I was able to take that same tax firm example and work on an additional 86 plus projects with them just from our initial one, right? And just every month servicing them, knocking it out of the park, ensuring that over time they're happy. And ultimately that we're still working together even this week going into next. There's a constant flow of work that comes from being good, surprisingly. Hard to not surprise, really. The strongest marketing current is good word of mouth. So I'll leave you with that. Let's get into how to set this up. So heading down here, having a logical design pattern. There's two core lists that you need to ensure that the design of your onboarding goes smooth. The first one is an internal one, right? A research pack that answers strategic questions and context relative to the pain points that you have surfaced in talking to that client. That allows you the opportunity to internally standardize that delivery. So much so that in the next station, when you go to actually deliver something, it's predetermined, right? You've already spent time meditating internally what this would look like as success. The next side of that is then the client-facing component. What sort of welcoming messages? What kicks them off? That walks them through each of the phases of that timeline. And how can you offload that communication into a channel that makes sense, right? Is that texting them? Is that emailing them? Whatever it is, you can offload that into the Hermes agent and command it from your phone, command it when you're off and about, even have it triggered autonomously when people sign up. This is one of those things you improve once you see a bit of success. Trying to create this in advance is a bit of a hiccup. So what does that mean? When a contract is signed, there's typically some sort of bespoke drag that is customized, that is experiential, that is new to you and the client. Ultimately, you want to ensure the assets that align expectations are available, and being able to map the proposal to that delivery in a way that is digestible makes sense. If you are a snow removal company, what does it look like to have your snow removed, right? Clean yard, right? Clean whatever, not having to skate on ice to get to your car. If you are a shoemaker, right? This is a bit more of a niche example, but you're essentially taking requests. If you're a designer, a fashion designer by any means, you're taking tickets and requests and you're saying, how do I convert this into what the client wants? If you are a consultant and you're looking for opportunities, you're taking a discovery call and transcript and then measuring that towards the packages and offers that you can provide somebody, right? So ultimately, whatever assets are relevant, you are including that in the kickoff so that there is room for questions, room for feedback, and then ensuring that automation just exists once things are working. All right, so once things are working, how do we actually set that up? Over here, you'll find the master prompt, right? So by saying new client signed, giving the client name, use my onboarding design to draft whatever welcome messaging and kickoff brief is needed, include whatever statement of work scope that is required for this, and then build that client workspace in the backend. So it can go create folders in Google Drive or whatever tooling they're using. It can build a research pack and assets relevant to that client so that then when they join that Google Drive, everything you guys talked about is available in a nice little handbook. And it didn't really require too much of a heavy lift on your end. Keep in mind, this is really valuable earlier on when you do see success in something, because it does have an exponential return based on joy of people coming in and seeing that this has been done before. That gives you positioning and that gives you leverage. Everything downstream inherits this sort of behavior. Meaning if you standardize too early, meaning you don't have success measured accurately, you can risk putting yourself into a bucket that blinds you towards other opportunities. Once you have something working, you then have the opportunity to save it as a skill and package it into a deliverable that over time you can just start to ship out one after the other. Again, this sort of quality gate, this thing takes time, and just like the previous stations, you want to spend that time going back and forth, building this with your agent. This gives you a reliable scoring sort of quality assurance checklist that as a owner/operator, you will be able to then have a bit more confidence in your day-to-day work without having to guess as much. Facts, contradictions, so what, the voice, all these things bubble to the surface because you have designed it to do exactly that. Now on to our second final station. This one I feel is the most important, of course, across all of the stations because it actually includes a catalog. There's a lot of nuggets in here that you can take and actually provide real revenue change and also real, I would feel, economic change in your personal life. By putting this station on paper, I was able to look at my own business as a real oxygen tank. I was able to shift basically how I treated the entire business and what I offered people into something that was a bit more digestible, a bit more clear, and ultimately allowed me to support my partner as she continues to study through registered massage therapy, which is full-time studying, mind you. So there's real fire beneath the station. I think you'll catch it in my voice. So before diving into the preamble, I'll actually save that for afterwards. Let me give you guys the gem straight away. This station is meant to move the needle in a few important ways. Ultimately, when you are servicing a business with AI and automation specifically, there are three core things to actually help the business: increase the revenue, bring the cost down, and mitigate risk. I said AI and automation. Realistically, if you really meditate on it, that applies across the board no matter what service you're offering. In my instance, I found that it was not more automation. It's owning an operating layer. It's being able to preserve that context no matter what interface you're working through and have AI route that action in a way that is effective. So for revenue, that was me providing a recruitment firm the capacity to generate 24K of net new pipeline within 3 weeks by giving them prospecting engines to find candidates that were higher likelihood to interview with their jobs. That is a free project now available as Job Scout, which you'll find in the school community, available for free to own, free to operate. It was really cool to kind of bring that to the masses. As a ex-recruiter, it's one of those things that I believe should be available, which is why I made it free. I also built a simple email classification system for a event company that was able to produce a net new of 18K worth of client recovery based on contracts that have already been signed and weren't really doing much with them, right? It was just generating net new opportunities. The biggest one is the tax firm example I mentioned earlier in the course. I was able to provide a full lead sourcing engine for the tax firm to pull federal tax liens directly from government websites, and 24/7 was able to route that to their sales team so that they can be the first ones on the sales floor to get in touch with those prospects. Within 6 months, we generated over 250K worth of net new pipeline, and that's growing day in and day out. A couple other catalog pieces. Again, the point of showing you this is not hubris. This is really not about me. Ultimately, it's just showing you what's possible when you connect these tools to different engines. From a delivery standpoint, I was able to bring the cost down for that same recruitment firm by taking the manual handoffs and the manual sort of back and forth and having that as an operating layer accessible to the recruiters. For the inbox triage that the event management firm experienced, they were able to see the manual work that they would have to spend responding and going through inquiry after inquiry. And then on top of that, having to follow up on stale opportunities, it just never happened. So by compressing that, I was able to surface underutilized opportunities. For the federal tax lien, that routing rhythm beats any paid tool that is already out there. In fact, there are companies that I won't mention that use the same tooling and charge 3 times what I charged, and they do that on a monthly recurring basis. I find that if I'm bringing down costs, ultimately, I want to ensure those opportunities are accessible to the folks that I'm working with. I do a lot of work within the energy and utility space, especially when it comes to sort of SAP-centric tooling. That's mainly in another opportunity outside of my own company. Ultimately, what that means, and I won't go through the examples of what that means for the previous clients here, but ultimately having a sense of governance, where deals go, who is responsible for what, and how can we create an operating system that is frictionless and useful for the end user is ultimately the goal. If you're interested in a full catalog, under the self-serve guide, which is linked inside of the course on the school community, there is a full list of different engines that you can build and take to the market. By contextualizing these, truthfully, within the industry and domain knowledge that you have, you can really circumvent paying software that exists, right? So the proposal generator, that's DocuSign, that's PandaDoc. You can take existing open source tooling and replace paid software for life. You're removing a stable bot subscription and you're giving them the tooling that they can run in-house. And then you're just charging them for managed services if they like to maintain it. And you're building more of a relationship rather than giving them a transaction and a solution and then stepping aside, which, by the way, a good handful, if not the majority, of mid-market enterprise companies operate like this. Not going to name names, but if you are solution centric, you are missing an opportunity to identify the real problem and move the needle in a way that actually helps the people you're helping. So what does that all mean? Let's bring it back. Ultimately, as a creative, and you may not view yourself as a creative, but if you are entrepreneurial to any descent, you are a creative in my eyes. You spend your days making and managing, making material, writing, creating, recording, or managing people, managing strategies, managing opportunities. There's a Paul Graham article on this if you'd like to dig deeper. There's tons of stuff on YouTube on it. But ultimately, you spend your days creating, whether that be with people or with material. Being able to create something that is ultimately useful for somebody is an experience of what's possible. Creating something that they want, not just what is useful, but something they want, is a probable exercise, right? It's possible to do these things. And it's also probable that if you would want it to be done, we can do it. However, those two are not enough. Having a return on investment that is reasonable, meaning it costs this much and it returns this much, then it becomes a viable business case study. In order to make sense of that, anchoring it in this increase of revenue or this decreasing of cost and or this handling of risk gives you an opportunity to make a business case for something that will actually help them move the needle within their business. This is not an exhaustive list. And again, it's anchored in AI and automation, but ultimately you want to build an engine catalog for yourself. By doing this, no matter what service you're offering people, you are standardizing and offloading that labor from yourself as a solo founder. Keynote, if you already outsource to external talent, you are left to the circumstance of what that talent can produce. By you being able to narrate before delegation, you are able to then measure where the inputs live, what processes go into it, what format and structure does this need to shape as, and then what does the client see on the other end of that. That then allows you to package it and deliver it in a way that is actually meaningful. Much like the other stations, this takes time. With the Hermes agent, you go back and forth. You correct this. Through your mobile app or through your desktop, you're able to command, drive the actual building of this. Considering that agents are doing the work, you are able to build those agents in a meaningful way through different profiles, different projects. You're able to then narrate that and setting a bar for something that is actually helpful. And then the golden grail or the golden goose is once that works, and it works for a handful of clients, wrap it into skill, make it repeatable, do it over again. Once it works, just continue. If it doesn't work, find out why, and then continue to swing the axe at it until it delivers to the quality of what you want. If you were offering advertising, connecting it to your meta ads and connecting it to your brand kits and your assets, saying this is what I want, and keep harnessing it, keep pushing it to get towards what you want. I promise you, especially with a Hermes setup, you'll be genuinely surprised of how close that experience truly is. Now, without that sounding like an info commercial, here's some proof. Ultimately, you want to take, going into station 5, what works, and then measure it. If you are not growing, you are experiencing entropy. If it is not a steady increase, and again, growth is not linear, by having good faith with yourself and your clients and delivering on a weekly and monthly basis, you are establishing, and that cadence of trust builds communication. It builds connection. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but the idea is you're delivering health and deliverables in a way that is repeatable, measurable. And when something is measurable, you can actually improve it and work with it. I like to do this on a weekly and monthly occasion, especially internally. It helps me internally figure out if I'm doing the right things, what am I not, and understanding when you are doing the right things, how well are they working for you. You can ultimately feed this in as a master prompt to Hermes to review what happened within the week. Again, this works with any other harness, considering that you have memory across sessions. I know that Hermes does, but again, I'm biased. But the idea behind this is you're creating a central point of truth that it can measure and improve upon. Of course, once it works, we schedule it, we wrap skills around it, and we standardize it. By doing that, you essentially get to experience a full visualization that is a feedback loop, right? So it's not just a retrospective data dump. It's something that actually shows your intention, mapping to your reality, that then surfaces variance that you can then correct. That loop is a feedback loop. And as a solo founder, it is the straightest path to getting towards where you need to go. Without this, you are flying blind. And when you're starting off, people will say that's a-okay. But if you really want to map the difference between the value practice and the value intended, creating these 5 stations allow you to actually meet yourself where you're at and establish consistent revenue. Ultimately, you are able to then prospect and find leads on an ongoing basis. Propose when they are ready to work with you. Onboard them in a way that is compelling and useful and helpful. Deliver in a way that is compelling, useful, and helpful. And then report back to yourself so you know what works and what doesn't. Continuing to work through these 5 stations allow you to run a solo founded business. And by doing so, create real change for people that truly need it. Ultimately, returning time where it matters most. Thanks for joining. We'll see you in the next one.